Well, thank you, John, and good morning. My name is Arnold Varson. I am one of the co-chairs of the All-Party Group to End Human Trafficking and Modern-Day Slavery. 8 years ago, we launched this group, and along with that group launch, we maintained a secretariat, which is the Allard School of Law, and we've hosted a number of events over the years together. We've hosted events for parliamentarians and staff to learn more about human trafficking and exploitation. And this week, we're pleased to once again host the International Justice and Human Rights Clinic from the Allard School of Law at the University of British Columbia. The clinic has been our partner since our launch 8 years ago. And today, we are here to talk a little bit about S211, a bill that my colleagues that flank me here pushed through Parliament a number of years ago, along with the support of the All-Party Parliamentary Group. So we asked the clinic to look into S211 and do a study on the effectiveness of it and what the reports that were brought forward. So they are here today to talk a little bit about that. I will turn the press conference over to Senator Miville-Dechêne for some comments, and then we will hear from the clinic and John McKay, who is a sponsor of the bill in the House. So, Senator Julie.
Bonjour, je suis la sénatrice Julie Miville-Dechêne. Je suis une des deux co-marraines et parrains du projet de loi S211, le projet de loi, la loi sur la lutte contre le travail forcé et le travail des enfants, qui est en vigueur depuis 2024. Donc, je suis ici évidemment avec mon collègue John McKay, qui est aussi le parrain de cette loi à la Chambre des communes, maintenant retraitée. Donc, ce que je veux dire ici, c'est que c'est un projet de loi, ça a été une longue lutte pour le faire adopter. Nous sommes absolument ravis qu'il l'ait été. C'est un premier pas pour lutter contre l'esclavage moderne. Et là, aujourd'hui, nous avons les résultats d'une première étude par des chercheurs sur le contenu des fameux rapports. Il y en a à peu près 5000, donc c'était impossible pour nous de faire le ménage là-dedans et de voir ce qu'il y avait. Donc, on a les premières impressions sur ce que les compagnies font pour lutter ou pour prévenir l'esclavage moderne, le travail forcé, le travail des enfants. Et donc, ce qui est important ici, c'est que c'est le début. Je crois qu'après que vous ayez entendu les chercheurs, vous allez comprendre pourquoi je dis aujourd'hui même que le gouvernement et Sécurité publique Canada doit renforcer les directives pour guider les entreprises pour obtenir des rapports qui sont plus significatifs qu'ils le sont maintenant. Oui, on a plus de 5000 rapports par année depuis 2 ans, mais il faut augmenter leur pertinence et c'est là qu'on est rendu. Et je crois qu'il faut le faire, d'autant plus que le climat est tel en ce moment que les États-Unis nous reprochent, le président Trump nous reproche à travers une procédure de ne pas en faire assez pour contrôler le travail forcé, le travail des enfants à la frontière. Donc nous avons tout intérêt à utiliser la loi S211, à la renforcer pour ne pas être victime d'autres tarifs de nos voisins américains. Merci.
My name is John McKay. I'm a former member of Parliament for Scarborough-Guildwood and along with Senator Miville-Dechêne, the co-sponsor of S211. As you know, private members' bills have a rather remote chance of ever making it through any parliament, and we're fortunate to have done that. We took three times to get it through, but finally did, and it became law in 2024. We've now had 2 reporting cycles on the bill itself, and we generally had framed our arguments in the form of human rights arguments or morality arguments, and occasionally we would frame it in the form of a business argument, i.e. it's hard for Canadian businesses to compete with slave labor. Now we have, if you will, entered a new phase. Those who are following is that Canada is renegotiating CUSMA. And when Donald Trump lost his tariffs case at the Supreme Court in the United States, he suddenly became interested in the issues of forced labor. And he notified 60 countries, Canada included, that he and his team would be investigating those countries for their forced labor practices, slave labor in the supply chain, shall we say. That has put Canada a bit on the defensive, but ironically, in Canada's response to this initiative by the President of the United States, we have something of a story to tell because S211 is world-class transparency legislation. The legislation is world-class. The enforcement of the legislation is possibly less than world-class. So our colleagues to the left here are going to talk about their analysis of the treasure trove of data that has been generated in the last two reporting cycles, and there is another reporting cycle to end on the end of May. And in their reports, they're going to show that the reports are less than fulsome, sometimes, how should we say, less than helpful, and would be, in our current existential crisis with the United States, our response could have been far more robust had that data been not only analyzed properly, but enforced properly. So I'm going to turn it over to, excuse me, Nicole Barrett from the Allard School of Law, and she's going to introduce her colleagues and share with you the research and findings. But may I just end with this final point. This has become a very significant trade issue between Canada and the United States. We are disadvantaging ourselves by not pursuing S211 to its maximum utility. So, Nicole.
Thank you very much, John. My name is Nicole Barrett. I'm a professor at the Allard School of Law at the University of British Columbia. I'm very pleased to run a clinic at Allard Law School, which has upper-level legal researchers, 12 of them. And we have been the secretariat of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for 8 years now. Each year we have a different topic that we research. And this year our research was on how companies have been reporting under Bill S211, because there's a reporting requirement for many companies. We analyzed a series, all of the reports. We couldn't go over the full 5,000 reports. So we have a sample size in 2 different studies, which we will introduce to you now. 119 companies were analyzed in the first study that the Allard School of Law did. And then many more companies, over 1,000, were analyzed in the McMaster study that you will hear about, also using artificial intelligence to find those results. So with that, I will pass it over to my colleagues who will give you further details.
So our clinic can provide 6 key findings from our analysis of the companies on the S&P TSX Composite Index. Our first finding is that mining exploration and development, real estate, and the services economy are not captured by the current Supply Chains Act. 25% of the companies on the S&P TSX Index have no legal obligation to report. Our second finding is that companies are free to report with any level of detail that they believe is relevant. So companies do well at providing generic details, but they do not do as well at providing specific details beyond the general reporting categories listed under the Act. Third, companies tend to presume that suppliers located in certain countries are safe without actually detailing an analysis of the specific suppliers. For example, if a company sees their suppliers from the United States or the European Union, they will presume the supplier is safe without actually analyzing the supplier's practices. Fourth, companies tend to report using language that limits legal liability without transparency. Companies will use phrases such as they have the right to terminate contracts, or that most of their suppliers are within the United States or a country that has a low risk of using forced labor or child labor. This is passive language that does not show companies using due diligence in their assessments of their suppliers. Fifth, companies provide a wide range of details in practices without any standardization between companies. And then sixth, we believe there may be a future potential for the use of large language model AIs in content analysis to compare the quality of future reports.
So based on these findings, we have a number of recommendations. The first one would be to broaden the scope of the law to include due diligence requirements, as well as amend the section of the law that currently limits its application to only those entities that produce, distribute, sell, or import goods. Our second recommendation is to improve transparency by standardizing reports, to mandate more specific details about certain practices, and to make information more accessible. Our third recommendation would be to make the National Report Database more research and user-friendly, as currently it is difficult to access these reports. Our fourth recommendation would be to provide a mechanism for victim compensation and remedies through the law. And our final recommendation would be to improve enforcement in general by creating fines for non-compliance with the law proportional to an entity's net worldwide turnover, as well as adopting stronger customs enforcement legislation, such as consideration of proposed Bill C-251.
My name is Sima Falah-Tafti, from a researcher from McMaster University. And so I'm a part of a research team on the issue of forced and child labor and the S-211 Act. We have found that the average reporting firm scored 36 out of 100 on our Disclosure Quality Index. That's not a passing grade by any standard. Most reports we analyzed were boilerplate, generic language, no specific suppliers named, no meaningful risk identification. Firms are filing paperwork. They are not doing due diligence. And I want to talk a little about the business case and on why this matters. This is not just a human rights issue. Over $30 trillion in global capital is now screened for supply chain human rights risks. Firms with weak disclosures pay more to borrow and get excluded from major indices. The United States is already blocking billions in imports at the border under the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. The EU will ban products made with forced labor starting in 2027. Canadian firms that can't prove clean supply chains will lose access to the markets that matter most to them. After Nefson, Canadian companies can be sued in our own courts for human rights abuses that happen abroad. That's not hypothetical. It's established law. Firms linked to forced labor face class actions, brand damage, and loss of government procurement contracts. Weak enforcement doesn't protect Canadian businesses. It punishes the firms doing the right thing by letting their competitors undercut them with no consequences. Strengthening S-211 levels the playing field for them. Thank you.
Okay, is that the end of your presentation? Okay. Is there any questions? Dylan? Dylan Robertson,
Hi.
the Canadian Press. Go ahead.
Sorry for the scramble there. I'm wondering, given that Canada is applying for the UN Human Rights Council, given that Anita Anand said human rights is one of the three pillars of our foreign policy, and given this US concern, what's the holdup here? What is the actual barrier to Ottawa having an effective regime on both what's in the bill and for the core?
Nothing. The short answer is nothing. there is no reason why the data that these folks have analyzed in the last 2 years couldn't be far more robust. And we could be actually doing something about impediments in our supply chains. It is concerning to us that we go to places like the UN and various other places and we talk a good game. But our good game is not backed up by robust analysis. There's been no enforcement in the bill. There's an enforcement mechanism in the bill. There's an ability to actually access company records. That's never been used. And, you know, I think the government was quite happy to just jog along. But now that Donald Trump has thrown the cat in with the pigeons, we are now going to be faced with hard questions, and I regret to say that some of the questions are going to be quite legitimate. I want to also state, though, that the United States is no paragon of virtue in this exercise, and we can readily criticize their record as well, but that's particularly useless. What we could really pick up our game, and I think that the data demonstrates that we could pick up our game and with a little bit more enthusiasm.
Si je peux ajouter, c'est vraiment, à mon avis, un problème de mise en œuvre. Comme vous le savez, ça prend des ressources pour mettre en œuvre un projet de loi. Il faut qu'il y ait des directives claires pour qu'on puisse avoir autre chose que des rapports génériques qui en disent bien peu sur les activités d'une compagnie. Les compagnies n'ont pas tendance à être transparentes par elles-mêmes. Donc, il faut qu'il y ait des directives plus solides pour qu'on puisse avoir des informations sur qui est impliqué, quel genre de vérifications sont faites, est-ce que c'est juste un code de conduite, quelque chose de plus sérieux. Et ça se fait au niveau des directives. Donc, il faudrait que le ministère de la Sécurité publique en fasse plus, qu'on lui donne probablement plus de budget, mais vous comprenez, si on ne peut même pas consulter les rapports de façon pertinente, parce que c'est très difficile de les sortir, il faut y aller un à un, c'est problématique. En Australie, il y a un très, très bon système, très transparent pour aller voir les rapports. Ça se fait. Il faut prendre de l'informatique et ça se fait. Et je dirais aussi, comme mon collègue, que ce projet de loi a des dents. C'est-à-dire que quand les compagnies ne suivent pas, n'obéissent pas à la loi, il peut y avoir des amendes, des sanctions. Jusqu'à maintenant, ça fait 2 ans que ce projet de loi est en vigueur. Il n'y a eu aucune sanction contre des entreprises qui n'auraient pas fait rapport.
As well, Nicole, I'm not sure if you can just address this a little bit around.
Can you just point the mic towards your mouth?
Yeah. Yeah, no problem. Just if Nicole can address this a little bit, or just around the scope of the bill and the scope of what the government's requiring. It's an interesting phenomenon that I'm observing, that there seems to be, the law says that this should capture this broad of a scope of the corporate world in Canada, and the government seems to be interpreting the law as much narrower than that. So if you just talk about that a little bit, Nicole.
Yes, I can point you to the public guidance for companies that is on the public safety website. And it actually contradicts the actual provision in the law and narrows the number of companies that are required to report. So, you know, we would encourage public safety, obviously, to stick with the letter of the law, because this, of course, is confusing for companies. They may find themselves in legal problems later because they're following public safety's guidance rather than the law itself. And so I think that needs to be fixed fairly rapidly before the confusion sort of compounds. And let's see, is there anything else?
We'll give an example of that.
Do you have can you just clarify a little bit what the scope change?
That sounds like a lawyer talking.
What is the scope change what does that look like?
The actual language, let's see.
Je peux peut-être vous l'expliquer en français et ça va vous donner le temps de trouver. Donc, avant, on ciblait les importateurs, les distributeurs, les vendeurs et les producteurs. Et maintenant, dans le guide, dans les directives, on dit que seuls les importateurs et les producteurs au Canada sont ciblés par la loi. Donc, c'est beaucoup moins d'entreprises. Prenons, par exemple, un supermarché qui distribue des marchandises. Quand on a écrit le projet de loi, John et moi, on croyait que c'était important que ceux qui vendent directement aux clients soient obligés de faire cet exercice parce qu'il y a beaucoup de marchandises dans les supermarchés et donc on a réduit la portée du projet de loi à l'intérieur des directives. On ne comprend pas vraiment pourquoi.
And to specify the language exactly in the guidance that is confusing, under the law, distributors and sellers are required to report, but in the guidance, under step 2, it says entities solely involved in distributing and selling are not expected to report under the Act. So it excludes a huge number of companies.
Thank you. And I'm going to double barrel a question. If the first two researchers could just name themselves so that we've got your names on tape so that we can just identify things. And also just more of a political question. I'm wondering with 2 weeks ago, the Michael Ma incident that occurred at committee, I'm just wondering what you made of the response around the core of the issue here on forced labor, the type of rhetoric that was coming from both the government, one of the government MPs, just given the gravity of what we're talking about here.
It is a bit of a theater of the absurd. I'm not in caucus any longer, and I don't know Michael Ma. I do know McQuaid Johnson, and I know she has some considerable expertise to even assert the proposition that there's no forced labor in China is absurd and flies in the face of all the evidence of pretty well every human rights group. So I much prefer her evidence over the questions that Mr. Ma was asking, but it does go to the depth of the problem, and the depth of the problem is such that Canada has a choice here. If we don't, if we go along to get along, then we will compromise our own values.
And I would jump on that just a little bit as well, is that from our perspective as in the opposition, the ground is moving under our feet a little bit because it also took probably about 3 days of zigging and zagging before the government really clarified where they're at on that, and that instability is concerning for us for sure.
Et je vous dirais que c'est pas parce que le Canada veut faire du commerce avec la Chine qu'on doit nier qu'il y a des graves problèmes de respect de droits de la personne en Chine. Le traitement des Ouïghours en est un, documenté de plusieurs points de vue. Bien sûr, les journalistes, les humanitaires ne peuvent pas aller dans la province du Xinjiang, c'est interdit. Donc, ce sont des preuves indirectes de travail forcé, mais qui sont nombreuses. Alors, on ne peut pas les nier. Et effectivement, oui, très bien, rouvrons les relations diplomatiques avec la Chine, mais ne faisons pas comme s'il n'y avait pas là de graves violations des droits de la personne.
Hey, can we just get the research, to Dylan's point, just tell us your name on tape if you don't mind.
My name is Elizabeth Laplante.
My name's Hendry Zhang. Do you need me to spell that? Or?
Yes, please, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure. It's HENDRYZHANG.
Thank you both. Any more questions, Dylan?
Always.
Okay, go for it.
Wondering about CORE. What should we make of this ombudsman? I mean, the UN committee was pretty forceful that we're coming up to a year now. When we asked Minister Anand, she did sort of indicate that there would be an appointment here, but there's no timeline. Is that acceptable? And is there any justifiable reason whatsoever that this would take 11 months?
I don't know the reason for why the position has been vacant for 11 months, but what I do know is that there are many pending cases, complaints before the Ombudsman's office, and so there are complainants who are just left not knowing what to do next or if Canada is going to respond. I would also point out that the Human Rights Committee from the United Nations reviewed Canada recently, a few months ago, and many of their recommendations focused on supply chain issues, due diligence, the Office of the Core, and asked for Canada to find effective mechanisms to focus on slave labor in supply chains and have effective bodies within the country that can oversee the process. So we hope that there will be a new core put into office because right now we're just sort of in limbo. We don't know what's happening with the complaints that are ongoing.
I would just add to that. So today we had a presentation on the reports that was presented today as well. But tomorrow the Allard School of Law will be addressing a similar group of people as we did this morning, just around the Office of Core. So we hope that some people that are attending that event tomorrow may have some insight on where that's headed.
And the former core will be there as well. Sherry Meyerhofer will be joining us tomorrow at 12:15.
Thank you. And I'm just wondering if you could sort of explain what sort of interaction you've had with both houses of Parliament and with the government so far. Have you had any productive exchanges with any of the ministers here, with the departments? Is there more representation from caucus than what we see at the table today or from the Senate?
Well, I'm no longer a member of Parliament, but they haven't closed the doors, so I've been into the Deputy Minister's office twice. I'm friends with, at least up until this morning, friends with the minister. And I think we've made representations to both in a very direct manner that things do need to change. And we're hoping that something will change as a result of the research of the folks to my left here, but of as I think Arnold said, the ground is shifting underneath us. The trade and business case that is being made, that we need to be much more aggressive about our human rights due diligence legislation.
De mon côté, c'est encore plus modeste. J'ai essayé de rencontrer le sous-ministre à la sécurité publique, mais à la dernière minute, ça n'a pas marché. J'ai parlé à quelqu'un de l'équipe qui s'occupe de faire ces rapports. Peut-être une chose positive qu'il faut dire et qui est beaucoup plus difficile à mesurer, c'est que son impression, avec toutes les conversations qu'ils ont avec les entreprises, c'est qu'il y a une discussion qui a été entreprise dans les compagnies à cause de ce projet, à cause de cette loi. Maintenant, les dirigeants, les compagnies parlent de travail forcé, de chaîne d'approvisionnement. Est-ce que notre chaîne d'approvisionnement est propre? Donc, selon lui, cette discussion est importante pour la prise de conscience et on ne sous-estime pas, nous, l'importance de cela parce que on a toujours dit que ce projet de loi était un premier pas pour essayer de faire comprendre ce que c'est, pour essayer de lutter contre le travail forcé. Il y a probablement des législations plus sévères. Ailleurs dans le monde, il y en a. Mais on croit qu'avec S211, qui est un projet de loi de transparence, mais avec des dents, on pourrait faire beaucoup mieux. Alors non, pas énormément de contact avec ceux qui prennent les décisions.
All right, you have a last question you want to ask?
Just to follow up, Mr. McKay, was this at GAC or was this at Public Safety? And do you have any other representation within the group that is not here today, just from the MPs or the senators?
It was Public Safety.
Okay.
That's the responsible department. I guess because I've become kind of associated with the file that people do reach out, and And I know the Trade Committee is interested in this issue. Whether the opposition makes it an issue or whether the government members make it an issue, I don't know, but I know that they are seized with it as well.
Like the all-party group is you three?
Is what?
So the All-Party Group is chaired by myself, Senator Miville-Dechêne, Member of Parliament Andréane LaRoche from the Bloc, and Ariel Kayabaga from the Liberal Party. And then we have a number of members from each party and quite a number of senators as well, so from various groups in the Senate. So.
All right, thank you all. That concludes today's press conference. We appreciate you making time and coming to the National Press Theater. Have a good rest of your day.